version 4.3 update introduces 2 new relic sets coming out. One of them practically is just tailor-made towards Mortani's Blade, and not many other characters can use it, so I'm going to mainly disregard that set. However, the other one, Navigator set, is actually quite usable on a few existing characters. Today, we're going to be going over the characters that actually do see a pretty big benefit from it. Stuck grinding in Honkai Star Rail? Need Stellar Jades fast? We've got you covered. Head over to U7 Buy, your ultimate gaming hub for save fast and cheap in-game top-ups. Whether it's Star Rail or your other favorite games, U7 delivers instantly and players love it. Check out their Trustpilot reviews, they're actually top ranked. On the Honkai Star Rail direct top-up page, you can recharge your account in seconds. For example, 8080 Honorific Shards cost $99.99 in the official store. However, on U7 Buy, you can see the price is cheaper. When you head over to U7 Buy, you might notice that the storefront display prices currently match the in-game store, but don't worry, the magic happens at checkout. Once you click the buy now button, your total instantly drops to our actual discounted price only. Just pick your server, enter UID, pay securely, and boom, your account is instantly loaded. Want extra savings? Use code PRETSR at checkout for 5% off, perfect for last minute pulls, battle passes, or surprising a friend. And here's a bonus. If you spend $80 a month on U7 Buy, you can grab the Honkai Star Rail Express Pass for only 1 cent, which is nearly free. Click on the link in my description, recharge fast, save more, and keep blazing those trails. First, what the set actually does. So the 2 set increases attack by 12%. 4-piece is able to increase skill and ultimate damage by 18%, stacking up to 3 times when the wearer enters combat or uses skill. At the start of the wearer's turn or after using their ultimate, 1 stack will be removed. This is a bit of an odd set, but there actually is quite a few characters nowadays that are able to utilize this, since many characters have setups where they are able to skill outside of turn, or they have repeated skills, or a specific one where everything is considered an extra turn rather than an actual turn. One of the biggest holders of this set I'm going to mention right away is Finon. This set still is comparable to his best in slot currently, which is Wave Strider. However, actually at E2+, this set becomes his new best in slot by roughly around 4 to 5%. Finon is an unfortunate character where he is saturated both on attack from Wave Strider and has quite good damage percent sources. However, especially if you have someone like Sparkle on the team, plus his best teammate being Ceridra, he has a lot more attack sources instead. So while Wave Strider is something you can carry into Ultimate and have throughout the entirety of the Ultimate, similar to the Navigator set, Navigator at E2 is actually able to outperform. When you go into Ultimate, you would have 2 stacks because maybe you have 3 before going into it, depending on how you do play. You go into Ultimate, you remove it, but if you do use his counter or his Meteor, which usually you go into it and Meteor right away, you're gonna be back at 3 stacks and it can't be removed because in Kazlana state, Finon isn't taking a turn, Kazlana isn't taking a turn, it's all extra turns, which are fundamentally different. So throughout the entirety of the Ultimate, you have the full 56% increase to skill and ultimate damage. It is a little unfortunate that it doesn't actually impact his enhanced basic attack as opposed to Wave Strider's enhanced buff, since Wave Strider does buff attack, which benefits everything. However, his main damage comes from the counter and especially the Meteor, and if you do have the final hit go off, that's also getting impacted. Finon is one of the best receivers of the set, but again, keep in mind at E0, Wave Strider does outperform by very slightly, and I mean like 1 to 2%. You can still very much use this at E0, and at E2+, that's when this set does overtake. Another user of this set is the rapid fire machine gun himself, Anaxagoras. For him specifically, and a few other characters of this actual thing, it's more situational due to the fact that he does have access to the Genius set, and TLDR when it comes to defense, shred, and ignore, Anaxa is one of the best characters you can get to 100% defense, shred, / ignore, depending on your investment and such, and he is one of the best holders, if not the best holder of the Genius set, because he can forcibly implant Quantum Weakness at all times, since that's how he works. So Genius 4-piece with the 20% defense ignore has full uptime. However, if you are in a situation where maybe you have enough investment where you have 100% defense, shred, / ignore without actually having the Genius set, this of course is very specific and doesn't apply to many people. However, there are people that do have that existing. That's actually when the set does come into play. This set can actually be better if you have a Genius set but not much other defense, shred, ignore sources, since at lower values it's still an increase having defense, shred, and ignore, but until you get to like the 70+ range, that's when it exponentially increases. So if you're getting like just Anaxa and you don't have any other forms, you have just the 28% from base kit and then plus Genius set, you can actually run the set comparably, especially on his team setups where he has Ceridra, where you're able to fire multiple skills up to 4 times or maybe even 6 times if you time the Ceridra ult and charge stacks. For a good chunk of this battle, Anaxa actually can have this fully stacked. No matter the team, he does take his actions, like on Sparkle Action Advance if you have her, you also could have Cyrene, which is the most popular teammate to have. So he does take turns, he does use ultimate pretty frequently, but because he does have his double skill and very frequently quadruple to even having the 6 skills, it's actually quite easy to stack this up and have it for a good portion of the battle, especially when your next option is comparing comparing to something like Scholar, which offers 20% skill and ultimate damage. So just one stack of this set, which he practically always would have, is comparable to Scholar. However, with Scholar, you can get that additional skill instance of 25% after using ultimate, so 45%. So to get an actual better increase, you would need all 3 stacks, but with Anaxa, it is possible. The next character would be Emiya, or Archer. This one is very self-explanatory. This guy takes 1 turn, so you might not have it, and then the occasional times you do ult. However, you do spam skill over and over and over and over again. And he's not repeatedly taking a turn. That's all within that turn. He's just firing skill multiple times within that turn. So you were to go into battle, you were to action advance him, he would have the stack. However, it would be removed, but you can very easily stack it up again because he just fires multiple times, and then you can usually contain 1-2 stacks and have that actually keep up. Similar to Anaxa though, the Genius set is Archer's actual best in slot, and the same logic does apply to really any character that can use the Genius set. If you're really using that Genius set, leveraging you up to having the 70% plus. When it comes to defense shred / ignore, which obviously will always depend on team variety, investment. If you're running a shredder like E4 Welt, which you don't actually need E4 to have that, I'm just saying E4 Welt because that's usually when you run them. Cypher, Cone, OG, Silverwolf, Nova Flare, so on and so forth. Actually having Genius set, there's a lot of ways to actually have the value, but if Genius set is pushing you up to like 80s, 90s, then it's usually always going to be best, especially since the damage percent in this game is a lot easier to come by. However, in the cases where you do have really high stuff, or you really need that actual increase in stats, usually this always becomes a comparable set to the Scholar set, which also is used by Archer, and it's usually a very resin efficient domain, which is why this becomes comparable, since it is able to have a higher actual cap than the 4-piece of Scholar. So anyone that can actually utilize Scholar has the benefit of this depending on how they play. There are some characters that don't actually get enough skills to stack it up, which is why Scholar would be better. However, on characters like Archer who repeatedly spam it, he is one of them that can utilize it. Same exact logic would apply to Zele. While she doesn't repeatedly fire skill within that turn, she has Resurgence proc, which is not considered taking another turn. It just counts as an extra action. So she is actually able to utilize and keep up the buffs very frequently, especially if you're proccing her Resurgence a lot outside of turn, which can happen depending on if you have E6 procs, if you get your ultimate outside of turn, and then you get to use it to do some setups. And even if you do take a turn and you're maybe even at 1 stack, you could skill, do your ult, get a bunch of Resurgence procs. Plus also now the ability she has to do the extra skill when an enemy is below 50% HP. So Rija being on the team as well as one of her best teammates, there's a lot of ways to keep it up for her. So the same thing that applies to Emiya also does apply to Zele. Finally, the last character I want to talk about, this one is a bit more on the iffy side. However, he does use it because especially now specifically how you play him with Cyrene, and that is Maide. This one is situational, I want to say, because you do use Scholar on him. The way you do play him now is like a glorified Memo Sprite. You just get Cyrene actions and give it to Maide, and you build Maide base speed because there's not really a reason for him to take his own turns because his actual 150 charge isn't what you're going for. You're going for the Cyrene buff on Maide. And especially with the setups you do have with Saridra and stuff, where you can actually time it to get double the God Slayers and then his own God Slayers anytime you do that. So outside of his turn, you can actually stack up the set. Unfortunately, the 2-piece is entirely useless since he doesn't scale off attack. However, the 4-piece, again, can outdo Scholar, but this is always dependent. If you are playing him on a team where you're still doing -1 with Sunday, or you're pairing him with Sparkle, or you're doing a double action advancer with Sunday plus Sparkle, in that case, you would want to use Scholar because he's going to be taking too many actions and not really have many stacks of the set. However, being played with Cyrene, where his God Slayers come outside of turn and frequently he doesn't really take a turn, he's able to stack it up and actually keep it up quite well. So in those cases, you can actually very much farm this for Maide as well. And that is it. Those are the primary ones that can receive an upgrade. Finon at E2 plus get an upgrade. Anaxa, Zele, Emiya also can all use this depending on your situation when it comes to comparatively to the Genius set. Since there's cases where this one could perform better depending on the amount of shed you do have, and will always be better if you are at 100%, because past that, Genius set wouldn't be doing anything. But if Genius set is pushing you up to the 80s to 90s, it can definitely outperform instead. And finally, specifically for Maide, there is that one case where if you are running him with no speed and Cyrene, which is how you properly play him now, he is one that can benefit from the set. Those are the characters actually getting an upgrade from the Navigator set. I do hope you found this video helpful. If you did, drop a like, we greatly appreciate it. If you're new to the channel or haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon for future videos like this, along with all the types of style content. And I'll see you later. Peace out.